your trusted source for news and analysis about Chicago White Sox prospects and player development, covering the Major League Baseball draft and international market, plus the action in Kannapolis, Winston-Salem, Birmingham, and Charlotte. This is the FutureSox Podcast.
Well, hello, White Sox fans. How you guys doing tonight? Welcome to the first edition of FutureSox, live streaming on the interwebs. My name's Ian Eskridge. Joining me tonight is the managing editor and grand poobah of FutureSox, James Fox. How you doing, James?
I'm great, sir. You got me on here, so step one, we're good so far.
We're working it. We're working towards it. We got some extra little things that we're going to do here and there, but we're working there. It's first night, and we made it. So colossal crashes or anything like that as of right now. So I don't want to jinx anything, but here we are. It is the middle of January, and the White Sox haven't really done a whole lot of earth-shattering moves, but they have done, a few things here and there that may or may not shore up what the White Sox lineup looks like next year. What do you think about how the White Sox offseason has gone so far?
I think it's a lot of moves. Obviously, I think the 40-man roster looks a lot different with big leaguers, right? Not particularly great big leaguers. I do think. It really seems like Chris Getz wants to be one of the best defensive teams in the American League. I don't know if they're going to hit it all. So, I'm sure we'll get into it on all these podcasts, like how bad we think this team's going to be. And I think it'll be like different bad, right? Like not hitting, but at least they're not going to play that brand of baseball where they're kicking the ball around constantly and you're losing 17-4 after everything spirals. I think that's what he's kind of trying to get rid of. So there's some placeholders, obviously, as along your Paul DeYoungs and Nicky Lopez's and the two new catchers that with a heavy defensive emphasis. And look, I don't think they're done, because I don't think the defense guy is going to play Gavin Sheets in right field, and I think there's probably some other spots too, right? So look, I'm not expecting huge expenditures, but I do think I understand what he's trying to do, like if he truly has no money. And that's what it seems. It seems like he has no money to spend, and he's just decided, look, I have to develop our own young pitching, so I'm going to get two catchers that I trust and put a good defense on the field. And that seems to be the plan. Yeah,
I would concur. There is not a whole lot to inspire confidence when you talk about the offensive outputs of the people that they have acquired. So I don't know where the runs are going to come from this year. I mean, it kind of goes to the thought that a lot of people have had, where it's just that you hope that guys stay healthy or have a career year, and you hope to catch lightning in a bottle, because I think that that's basically about the only way that you can think that they're going to score over 3 runs a game for next season. So
yeah, I think you're banking on a resurgent Yoan Moncada, like in his what is his last year, so he could maybe get paid. Look, that wouldn't surprise me, just because like he's got to get paid again, right? Like Aloy, you can't really count on. I didn't really think he'd be on the team, but it just kind of seems like he doesn't have much interest at that price point, like around the league. I don't think so, but I also don't think Getz is going to play him defensively. So that's your DH. We have the underachieving Andrew Vaughn so far, where we're just waiting for a hitting coach to unlock him. And, we've kind of talked about the other guys. Oh, yeah, and then Luis Robert. They do have one true superstar, and it is the FutureSox podcast. So, hopefully they have another one coming soon, but definitely not at the beginning of the year with Colson Montgomery.
Yeah, well, this kind of transitions into the next thing that we wanted to talk about. When you talk about, I agree with you. Colson Montgomery is a little ways off. So when you talk about a guy that the White Sox are going to put out there that's going to have a superstar potential, at least, you think about what the possible return is on a Dylan Cease trade. What's the latest that you're hearing on the Dylan Cease trade?
Well, so like I think we've heard Baltimore since the deadline, but the problem with Baltimore is like Mike Elias he was in Houston. Houston never really traded their top prospects, and it seems like Baltimore doesn't want to either. And when you look at their prospect list anywhere, they're loaded with guys that are 22 to 25, and they don't have spots for all of them. But Elias doesn't really care, I don't think, about that. So, look, like I was hoping that they'd get a bunch of big market clubs in this thing. Red Sox, Mets, Yankees, and they would push Baltimore, Cincinnati, some of these other teams to make a move. I'm not going to say Chris Getz overplayed his hand, because if you made me bet, I still think Cease is not on the White Sox. But it does seem like maybe Baltimore or a surprise or like bust at this point. So just with some of the stuff I've gathered, like over the last few days, even like looking at what John Heyman has written and looking at Nightingale and Rosenthal, it does seem like Getz has asked for like a lot, but it doesn't seem like that much. I know you probably saw the Yankee stuff. Like they're balking at Spencer Jones. I mean, that's like crazy to me, right? And
Yeah.
so I think with Baltimore, like the Sox are probably asking for 2 of their big 5. And look, I think people listening to this probably know who that is. I include Jordan Westberg in that. I don't think that's really realistic, but I think something headlined by Heston Kierstead or Westberg, and then some of their guys further away, like I think that's probably a match. I'm hoping that Chris Getz, has like a drop dead deal that he knows he'll do, that he just hasn't come to the table with yet, right? He's still holding out for as much as possible. He's being told no. But then, like 2 weeks from now, he's like, okay, I'll take this. And then like it happens. I'm hoping that's what it is, because I am scared to death of him pitching opening day for the White Sox. Because I just, not that I don't want to see Dylan Cease. Like it doesn't matter. The White Sox aren't tanking this year, like on purpose because of the draft pick stuff. I just don't want anything to happen to him or have him pitch poorly, because they really need this trade return in order to be good again anytime soon.
Yeah. I'm kind of on the same wavelength as you here. I don't think that he's asking too much for Dylan Cease. I think that the thing is that obviously Elias is prospect hugging pretty big, and I'd say probably the Yankees are as well. And to me, it seems like both of them have like some sort of a, not that Dylan Cease is going to cost them a lot of money, because we know, with his arbitration number just hitting at $8 million, that, monetarily speaking, Cease is not going to cost. He's probably the best cost to results ratio that you're going to get that's out there right now. But, I just don't see, maybe they're just trying to not spend money here. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on here as well, because there's a reason why a trade hasn't happened yet. And it's probably because Getz is asking for a reasonable return, and they're just not ready to give it up yet.
I could see that. And the thing that I found interesting, so John Heyman mentioned like a few days ago, and I don't know exactly how it was written, but he said that the White Sox want Jordan Westberg, essentially, right? Now, Jordan Westberg isn't on prospect lists anymore. He's graduated. So some of the White Sox fans I talk to like are convinced that means he's like not a top prospect anymore. Obviously that's that's not really how this works. But then I saw today from Bob Nightingale that, they asked for that they're not going to do a deal without one of Kauser or Kierstead. So then I just kind of put together, like, look, that seems to be where a holdup is, right? Like, I don't think Jordan Westberg is a second piece. I think it is unrealistic if they're asking for one of Kauser or Kierstead and Westberg and other stuff. So I could see where, like, that would be an issue if that's what it is. But to me, like, some of the packages I've seen, I don't have much interest in Joey Ortiz. I mean, that's a 26-year-old all glove guy he's a big leaguer, but like that's just like not what the White Sox need. Like Norby can really hit, but like he might be a left fielder. Like to me, that's why like, and some people disagreed, and I put this on some forums and on Twitter. Like the 2 guys that I think are sleepers in that system that are going to be top 100 prospects this year are Dylan Beavers, who was a, like a supplemental first rounder, I think, out of Cal last year, the year before. And then a right-hander, Chase McDermott. Like, if you could get both of those guys, but Westberg had to be your headliner, I think I'd almost prefer that to like a Kerstad package where we have to take Joey Ortiz and like some filler. I just, there's certain guys in that system that just don't really do much for me. So I was really hoping that the Yankees would step up here, but it doesn't really sound like they're going to.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. The guy I've been on with the Orioles has been Samuel Basayo. And, like his positionally, he's not the ideal fit for the White Sox, considering that he's probably not going to stick at catcher. But, I mean, prodigious power and has looked really good. I mean, I think he played in 3 levels last year. And that's a guy that I'd like to take a stab at if he's going to be, if your secondary guy is going to be a little bit lower, but they're saying now that he's going to end up like top 3, possibly top 3 in the system, when the rankings come out. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it seems like Mayo and Basayo have jumped those other guys, the guys that we've kind of, I mean, obviously Jackson Holliday is number 1, like in all of baseball, right? But if Kauser and Kerstad are still on lists, it seems like Mayo and Basayo might have jumped in front of those guys. Now, like a lot of Kauser's value is like him staying in center field, which to the White Sox, like, isn't that important because like Luis Robert's going to be in center field. So, and that's the other thing with Baltimore too, is like, there's first base risk with Kjerstad. For like the White Sox, it's not that big a deal because I think he's going to mash and he hits left-handed, so we can find a spot, right? But if you're Baltimore, you already have Adley Rutschman. Kjerstad could end up at first. Basayo could end up at first. Mayo could end up at first. So, and look, like Mike Elias typically hasn't really cared, right? Because it'll all sort itself out in the end. And I think they'd like to make a trade. So yeah, I mean, whatever it is, they either are unwilling to make any sort of trade, or Chris Getz is still asking for a little bit too much. We'll see if Getz comes down at all and see if they can get this done.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that a lot of people are worried about is the starting rotation. And I know that you just did a feature on Sox in the Basement, and one of the things that you guys talked about was the starting rotation. And one of the things, to me personally, is absurd. But, one of the things that's been talked about in the last week is Garrett Crochet making a run at being a starter. How much run do you think that has? Do you think that that's even close to being a realistic thing this next season, other than if it's in the minors?
I think it has to be in the minors. If they're doing it, it's in the minors, and you get your year of control back and you see what you can do. I mean, look, I was like, when they made that pick, we hosted a show live, I believe, and there was a lot of talk with me and Josh Nelson, and Rankin didn't do that one, I don't think. And Josh was convinced from the beginning, like, he's a reliever. He watched a lot of college baseball, way more than I do. And, I just kind of knew what the experts were saying and what Mike Shirley had said. And some people did legit think that he could start. Like, he had good enough stuff to start. Mike Shirley said after the draft, like, we think he's a number 3 starter, right? Well, pandemic happens. We're all wowed by him coming out in relief against Cincy. And then the turning point, I think, was that next offseason when they should have been stretching this kid out, to whatever. Even if he's not starting, like, at least you're using him 70 plus innings, right? Like in some sort of high leverage relief role, but you could throw 2 2/3 occasionally. But no, like, Tony La Russa needs a loogie, and that's essentially what they turned this guy into. And then he's been hurt since. So the one thing, like, I don't mind them trying this because, like, I'm not sold that he can, like, pitch in high leverage anyway. Like, right. I don't know that he can throw 4 to 5 times a week. So you might as well try this and see if you can salvage something. But trust me, like, we've talked about this a ton on the show. Like, I don't know how you ever build up enough innings for him to be like an actual starting pitcher. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think he'll either be in Birmingham or Charlotte with this collection of guys that we're going to talk about. But I mean, yeah, that's the only way. I mean, they cannot, like, throw him out there every 5 days in Chicago. It's not going to work that way.
Yeah, it's, and this is like something that I've been saying for ages is that 101 mile an hour Crochet, fantastic, but is that going to be is that going to be something that you're going to be able to use for more than an inning or two as a long relief guy? Is this something that you're going to be able to use in for 5-6 innings as a starter? I don't think so. But what I've also seen is that 96 mile an hour Garrett Crochet is not nearly as effective. So where does that leave him? I don't know. And the thing is that the most that we've seen him top out at now down in Charlotte last year, I think was 97. So, if he's not getting back up to that elite velo, what are we even looking at anymore?
Right, and he hasn't thrown the secondaries enough to have any idea whether they're even playable, right? Like if it's a plus slider and a pretty good change and he's 96 to 98, like okay, fine. But it hasn't been that. He's been fastball only, he walks guys, he's been hurt. So yeah, I mean it's not great, man, but it all goes back to kind of, you're taking a guy with that low innings, like with the 11th overall pick in the draft. Like I kind of hated it from the beginning because it's just not the way that I typically like to do things. Like if there's that much reliever risk, like what are you doing that high? But at this point, if you're Chris Getz, you just want to salvage something like out of the situation. And Chris Getz has, he doesn't owe anything to Garrett Crochet. Like he doesn't need Garrett Crochet to be on the big league team. If he's got to go down, he's got to go down. Whether fans or whoever consider that service time manipulation or whatever. Like, but this experiment is not one that's going to be conjured up in the big leagues.
Yeah, like Getz has got to salvage some sort of value here, because if I mean he doesn't have to, I guess, but he's going to at least try to get some value out of this, because at this point, if you don't get, you're just looking at a wasted pick at that point. Speaking of wasted picks and and meddling in drafts, Jeremy Haber is being said to be an advisor, and is I don't know, they're shipping him off to the Arctic Circle or something to go work somewhere else.
Shipping out to Boston, I think.
Ship it out to Boston. I don't think they'd take him. But Jeremy Haber's on his way out. How are you feeling about that turn of events?
Yeah, so I think it's positive. Like I've met Jeremy Haber a couple times and had like positive interactions. But the one thing I will say is, like, from talking to amateur scouts and just, other people around draft time, he had a lot of influence in the draft room. And from what I've kind of gathered is, like, it's a lot of influence that he shouldn't necessarily have. Now, you always hear occasionally about Ken Williams comes in the room and puts his foot down. You're the executive vice president of the organization. Like, it is what it is. I hate it, right? But it's Ken Williams. Jeremy Haber's sitting there on his computer telling you to take a college hitter when, the entire staff is like on board with taking a prep guy and going the whole strategy. Like, it's probably kind of annoying, but, you can choose to be one of 30 big league scouting directors, or you can quit at that point, So I think it's kind of, not that Mike Shirley and his staff didn't like Jacob Gonzalez, but like, I wasn't expecting that pick because, I had kind of been under the impression that if it wasn't going to be Blake Mitchell, who was already gone, by the way, he went to Kansas City, there were a couple other high school guys that I was expecting. And then all of a sudden it was Jacob Gonzalez, and then Jacob Gonzalez signed for as cheap as he signed for. So yeah, look, I can't tell you that they're going to make the proper picks every year with Mike Shirley and his staff picking the guys, but at least you're letting the guys that are doing the work make the pick or make the suggestion, right? Like, if they draft somebody that stinks, it's ultimately going to fall on Chris Getz, right? It's going to fall on the general manager. Like, nobody's talking about, like, okay, maybe some of us are, right? And Nick Hostetler was a really good man too. But, like, when people talk about Zach Collins and, some of the other busts, like, that's on Rick Hahn, because Rick Hahn was the GM, right? So that's ultimately what it's going to be. But I do think it sounds like Chris Getz, at least like the people that he puts in place, like department heads, are like able to do their jobs. So that's one thing I am looking forward to going forward. I wish Jeremy Haber the best, but when you're going to clean out, I like full clean outs like this. So it's good that you don't really have many hangers on.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same thing I said about Hostetler, a super nice guy. But at the end of the day, the results are what the results are. And, we've seen with the team, regardless of, what his station was with everything, is that I'm with you. The full clean out would have been ideal, but, we still have Getz around. So that is what that is. And we'll see ultimately how that unfolds.
Well, and I've heard positives there though, right? Like at least the good thing is like I've heard if they're gonna promote internally, they hired the right guy, right? Because it could have been Jeremy Haber, so. I mean, Chris Getz was the one that was the most qualified. He's brought in people from the outside. I know it's all Kansas City Royals. I know, and even people were mad over Jin Wong this week. He's literally gonna write contracts and exchange arbitration, and that's fine. That's that part's not that big of a deal, right? So look, I'm willing to give Chris Getz the benefit of the doubt. He might be okay. It's just he's in an impossible situation because of who the owner is and because of there was no process towards hiring him. I said that from the beginning. This could work. 3 years from now, we could love Chris Getz. But I mean, he's going to take arrows here initially because he doesn't really have a choice.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there is pretty much, with the way that he was hired, there's no way that he can right off the bat come in with a clean slate and be like, oh no, everything's going to be different, because everybody's got that, he's got that stink of how things turned out on him, regardless of what position he was in, what decisions he was making. There's not really a whole lot he can do there. So tomorrow, the international market opens up. The White Sox have a few guys that are said to be linked to them that they are supposed to be signing with. Why don't you go ahead and tell me about a couple of those, the couple of guys that we do know about at this moment?
Yeah, so I'll say I have a piece up on the website. I usually preview the international class, and they have just under $6 million to spend. Last year we know they had similar. They did not spend it all. At least they traded it for two guys that are interesting, right? As instead of what they used to do with the money. But I mean, Eduardo Herrera is their top guy. There's really no way to judge how good these players are. Ben Badler has him ranked 16th, but that's because it's the 16th biggest bonus. So it is $1.8 million. That was reported by Fangraphs. And I think he was number 11 at MLB. But I mean, look, for anybody that doesn't know, these kids are usually signed at 13 or 14 years old, and you're projecting a body type. And Eduardo Herrera was a shortstop, and now he's 6'3", 200 pounds, and he's moved to third. And in his write-up at MLB Pipeline, he's being compared to Albert Pujols. So I love when we compare 16-year-olds to Hall of Famers. If he turns out to be Albert Pujols, that would be a great signing, I think, Ian.
I would enjoy that.
Yeah, that would be pretty good. But no, I mean, so he's got some of the biggest power in the class. So he'll be a right-handed power-hitting third baseman. He likely, I would imagine, plays in the Dominican Summer League next year. So, you'll be tracking those scores at noon on a Wednesday during the season to see how many home runs Eduardo Herrera has. Jurickson Profar is another one. He's out of Curacao. Yes, it's Jurickson Profar's younger brother. He's signing for $700,000. Sounds like an athletic shortstop, but he's also sprouted up to 6'3", which is a little bit interesting. And then the third guy was listed as a catcher, Jesus Promoldi is what it is. But he's apparently moved to third too, and he's just another big power guy, lefty power. So look, that's about $500K, right? So I didn't want to do a ton of math, but it looks like just over $3 million.
Yeah,
so,
it's like half.
Yeah. So last year they announced them in a couple of different days. They announced all the guys from the Dominican, all the guys from Venezuela. It was probably 30 guys total. And Javier Magoyan, somebody that we're going to talk about, he was a $75K signing last year out of Venezuela. He hit 10 homers. I think he's going to be a top 30 guy everywhere. I think he will be at Pipeline BA. He definitely will be for us when we do our list. So look, I kind of like this strategy. Like, I don't know that any of these guys are going to be great, but I like signing 25 teenagers, like instead of, a Cespedes, or, you're just like waiting for a 22-year-old Cuban that's going to be your savior. And then you rush him through the minor leagues. And that was like half of your bonus pool. So, I think Marco Patti, he's been hit or miss, but I do think some of his hits have been when he's been forced to like spend 300,000, or some of these, Brian Ramos is one of the best prospects in the system, $300,000. I talked about this on Sox in the Basement too, but like Lenny and Sosa might be nothing, right? But I mean, even if he's a fringe big leaguer, like for 300,000, like Jose Rodriguez signed for 50K. So I kind of like Patty's track record with some of these lesser guys. I wouldn't be surprised if he signs a couple of interesting ones, that we follow throughout the season that end up on top 30 lists. So this is a step, I think, in the right direction, because at least they're signing teenagers.
All right. Well, let's take this. Okay. So, one thing that we saw this year in the Rule 5, and it's the reason why we got Shane Drowan and Jose Ramirez from the Red Sox, because one thing that the Red Sox do is that they generally sign like 35, 40 guys in the international market, and that's why they can't afford to keep all these guys each year, and they end up having to let guys go through the Rule 5 draft, so we end up with those two guys. Not that they're going to end up sticking, or that, we're going to send them back. They might be good, they might not. We'll see how it works out. But when you look at somebody like, say, the Braves, where they spend their entire bonus on one guy, and then you've got the Red Sox, where they're casting a wide net, I like to say. Where would you rather spend $5 million on one guy? Hey, Fabled Familiarita, thank you for the follow. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, would you rather do something like that, where you're pumping all your money into a guy that you think is going to end up being one of your top 5 prospects? Or would you rather look at, spreading that money out to a bunch of people and trying to find, some diamonds in the rough, as opposed to going after these guys that that you're going to have to spend a ton of money on? Where do you sit in that?
So I think my preference would be to sign a bunch of guys, but I think like occasionally, if you give $5 million to the best player in the class, that would be fun too. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you can do that every year. Now, it looks like the Padres have basically made a habit of it, and nobody's going to criticize like the way they do things. Like, so they got Ethan Salas this year. They got the best guy, Leo Dallas DeVry. He's probably about $4 million. But like you said, I mean, the Braves are signing Jose Perdomo. It's like over $5 million. They have the same bonus pool as the White Sox, so like 5.9. So I haven't even really looked closely if they have any other listed signings on Badler's board, but I mean, yeah. So I mean, look, there's a very good chance that Jose Perdomo is awesome, but if he's not, like, it's your entire bonus pool, right? So
Yeah.
No, I think I kind of like Cleveland makes a habit too of spreading out the money. And look, and that doesn't mean like everybody's 500K. You can have a couple of $1 million signings in there. You could have a $3 million signing, and then a bunch of guys for less than that. I think one way to do it is pitching. Like, for anybody that follows this market closely, the pitchers do not make very much money. And when these guys are signed, they're so young that all of a sudden, like, now they're 17, they're throwing 95. And it's like, oh, why did this guy sign for $30,000? It's like, well, because they agreed to a deal when they were 13 years old. So, that's one of the reasons. It's one thing that Houston has done a very good job of. Like, a lot of those pitchers on their big league staff were low dollar signings. They did a really good job with some of those guys in the minors. We're going to have one this year. And Christian Mena, I mean, when he signed with the White Sox, Ben Badler came on this show and kind of raved about him. And like, ever since then, like, my interest was piqued, right? And then you kind of see Mena fly through the system. He had some issues last year, but like, I think that guy's going to pitch in the big leagues this year. So even if that's a number 4 starter, I think they paid him $250,000.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm a big fan of that. I think you want more cracks at the apple. And like, the biggest reason for that is because you just don't know what these guys are going to develop into, because they're just so young. I think you're bound to get 1 or 2 of them if you sign 25 every year.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt, and that was one thing I was wondering what was going to happen now that that Hahn and Williams are gone. Was Marco Patti's strategy going to be, was he going to be allowed to work the system a little bit more? Yeah, exactly. Who knows? Who knows what's we'll see. Hopefully as we get here, we get to see some more guys, coming in, and we don't have, $2.5 million sitting in the bank, in July, which is something that we're used to seeing, and then them dumping the money off. Let's hope that that's not, what we're looking at here. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge problem, and I didn't know what Marco Patti's actual strategy is. We're a decade into Marco Patti. And everybody I talk to that has sources in the Dominican and he's highly respected. Yep. Marco Patti's at these events and people talk about him like he's revered. But then you look at the nature of the White Sox classes and they really are hit or miss. So I mean, is that Jerry Reinsdorf, Ken Williams, the Cuban pipeline thing? They want developed guys already that could get to the majors quickly, and you're spending $2 million on it. Is that them? Is that truly the way Patti would prefer to operate? I don't really know. I know Patti is a little bit older too, and he doesn't have the director of international scouting title. I always kind of note that, right? Marco Patti and Jim Thome have the same title, which is kind of weird to me. But I mean, because one of them is a huge part of the organization, and the other one just walks around at spring training. So look, not that I don't know anything about this, right? But if they have all of a sudden within the next year, a director of international operations that isn't Marco Patti, that wouldn't shock me. Or if you just change his title and give him a real title and he is your guy, he might be their guy. But yeah, that was one of the things I was eyeing with some of these other changes. And maybe it just hasn't been done because his market is January 15th, tomorrow, right? So maybe it's kind of like the NFL, scouting staffs change in July, after the draft happens. Maybe we see some sort of shakeup, or he kind of talks about what he wants to do. But I mean, he was in Toronto before. I know he was a Ken Williams guy. So I don't know. I don't really know. We'll see. But they need to get more bang for their buck out of the international market for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, that the guys winning International Scout of the Year awards, so clearly, and I see him catching a lot of flack on social media, and I don't know as if that's not, again, I don't know whether that's something that is warranted just because of the results that they've gotten. I don't know what kind of constraints are being put on him. I don't know who's telling him what he can and can't do. So, I mean, really, who knows? So,
yeah, and in this marketplace, it's just so hard. You look at Ethan Salas last year, obviously Wander Franco. It's a topic we're not really going to broach, I don't think. But look, I mean, the Rays find Wander Franco when he's 14 years old. They commit $5 million, and then he's basically socked away with his trainer until he's allowed to come to your facility. I had always kind of heard that Jerry just wasn't really a fan of committing that much money to 14-year-olds, right? So, but the thing is, if you're not gonna do that, you're just not gonna be a factor in the market, which is my interpretation of why the White Sox would be left with money. And it wasn't even necessarily that they get all the Cuban players because they have all these scouts in Cuba. A lot of times it was they were one of the only teams that had money when these guys would defect and get here. And it's okay, you're a free agent now, but teams have money tied up in these classes for years. I mean, the international scouting directors are in the Dominican right now scouting kids for 2027. It's just not, you know what I mean? So you could have some stud come off the island, tomorrow that's free to sign with anybody, and nobody'd be able to give him $3 million because everybody's money's all tied up. So I do think that's part of it, right? a Cespedes like breaks free or an Oscar Colas breaks free. And yeah, like the White Sox are an easy landing spot. Like you had Minnie Minoso and Jose Abreu, and the list goes on and on. But they also have money, which none of the other teams like seem to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we'll see how this whole thing shapes up. I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot, like you said. I mean, ultimately, like you said, because you're talking to these kids when they're like 13, 14 years old initially. And, Marco Petty's building these relationships, and that's, I mean, realistically, if you look at the White Sox top 30, a good amount of those people are people that Marco Petty brought into the organization. But ultimately, also, when you see the farm rank, is that enough? I don't know. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like it, right? And it seems like all these, like when you see deadline trades, these are the guys that get moved, like all the time. It's always like, somebody's, even if it's just like a throw in, right? Like the Rays do it typically. Like don't give them like a Dominican signing that's in A-ball because they're going to swindle you, right? Like don't trade with the A's. Like who's their top prospect was a throw in from Cleveland. Like it's just absolutely, insane right now. So yeah, they need to do, and even like, look, I mean, like Fernando Tatis Jr., right? Fernando Tatis Jr. was signed for $700,000. Like, it's not like he was some top 5 player in the class that the White Sox drafted and then traded. Should they have known better? Should they have traded him? Absolutely not. They shouldn't have traded him. But I mean, it's not like he was some like master signing. I think he was 29th in the class, according to Jesse Sanchez that year. And then he turned into a stud, and like it happens, but, so that's just kind of with this market, guys come out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think Tatis was batting like 168 or something like that when he was traded. It's like, and he was striking out a ton and wasn't hitting a bunch of home runs. So, it's like, Elijah Tatis, I mean, granted, we've seen pictures of them standing next to each other, and, like Elijah is like a foot and a half shorter, but, like he struck out at the, roughly around the same rate of like 35-40% that Fernando was striking out at when he was traded. And then he goes to, San Diego system, and he becomes a stud. And I don't know, say what you want about extra little, things that might have aided in his
right.
ascension to being a top prospect. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
So it is interesting. Like I brought it up on Sox in the Basement the other day. Like I try not to get too excited over DSL numbers, but I also look kind of around to see what other people are saying, right? Because look, like I noticed Javier Magoyan had 10 homers. Like it's uncommon. So when Ben Badler kind of starts talking about it, and the writers of Baseball America say he's a definite top 30 guy, okay, I'll listen, right? But there's been a lot of times where guys have had success on the dirt fields in the DSL, then they go to Arizona, never to be heard from again, and they don't even make it to Kannapolis, right? It's just it happens so many times, right?
Benjamin Bailey was supposed to be amazing,
and because he got on base at a 440 clip in the DSL with horrible umpires and horrible pitchers, and it's just really tough. You really have to look for loud tools. Like homers are important, strikeouts are important, all of that stuff. But even then, like until they're in high A, I mean, it's really difficult to know what you have unless you have one of like the studs. Those guys show up like right away and you can tell.
Yeah, when I did the interview with Andy Barquette, two of the guys that he said were the guys that were the ones to watch, and that was Javier Mogollon and then Abraham Nunez. He said those were the two guys to watch from the current class from the DSL. So, we'll see what comes of them. Like you said, the DSL, when half the time these guys can't find the strike zone, the pitchers can't find the strike zone. So the hitters are swinging at things that they shouldn't be swinging at. So, we'll see.
Nunez was a $700,000 signing. So, significant. Same thing. They had like a catcher last year that was pretty high. And then Luis Reyes, who we'll follow this year to see, because he did start to like figure it out a little bit. Reyes was like one of the top Dominican starters. Struggled really bad at the beginning. But I mean, yeah, I think anything 500K or above is generally interesting and like worth following. I say that, and then Javier Magoyan was $75,000. So, but even with him being 75K, Ben Badler listed him as like the sleeper in their class, like before they even played games. So listen to Ben. That guy knows what he's talking about.
Exactly. Just, especially with guys like that, if I can't see anybody, if I can't put my eyes on them, I automatically defer and just go, these guys know more than me about these guys because I've never seen them take a swing, so I have no idea. So,
and it's going to be unlikely that these guys, like, you're not jumping stateside right away just because of like January now instead of July. Like the bonus rules are really bad. I'm not going to get into it on this, but guys are really shortchanged if you bring them to the United States early. So, look, unless it's one of these older guys, like most of them are just going to play in the DSL, and then you won't see them till Instructs.
Yeah, not a fan of how they've changed the whole date system. But yeah, I agree. It's one of those things that'll get us down a rabbit hole for another half an hour, and we don't need to do that. Do you have anything else this week that you're looking to talk about, or are you good?
No, I think I'm good. Follow us. I'll do what I can to get more information on their international signings. I'm not sure that the White Sox will have it out on Monday. They're notoriously late. Maybe they'll be different under Getz, but look, you really can't release that stuff until the players actually sign. And I don't know whether they'll be in the DR on Monday or whether they'll be in Venezuela. We'll see what gets announced, but some of that stuff will trickle out as the week goes.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Ian Eskridge. Switching my X handle here to at Daily White Sox. You can follow James Fox at JamesFox917 over on the X/Twitter. Also, FutureSox.net. You can find all the written content and all of the evaluations and everything that James is doing over there. Yeah, like he said, we have merged houses from White Sox Daily to Future Sox. So any kind of content or all that stuff will all be housed on FutureSox.net, which is now getting a little bit of an overhaul. And as you can see with this whole thing, that the podcast and all that stuff is also getting an overhaul. So I got some exciting things coming here into the new year, and we appreciate you guys for listening, taking the time to check us out, give us a follow, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform for podcasts. We appreciate you. For myself and appreciate you guys. You guys have a great night, and we will catch up with you guys next week. Thank you. Have a good night.